Okay, we're live. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome, everybody, to our Commission on the Environment meeting. Hope everyone is doing well in their virtual places. I think we can just get rolling right into it. We'll start with roll call. I will go first. Remember, we have some specific phrasing that we need to use. So I'm going to start with Tom Alwyn, attending from East Lansing in Ingham County, Michigan. And I will just go along by the screen and have Ann go next.
Yeah, this is Ann Earhart, attending from East City of East Lansing in Clinton County.
Thank you, Ann. And Cheryl?
Cheryl Schmidt, East Lansing, Ingham County, Michigan.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hello. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Cindy Roper, East Lansing and Ingham County.
Thank you, Cindy. Cliff is next.
Cliff Walls, East Lansing in Ingham County.
Thank you, Cliff. Michael.
Hi, it's Michael Townley, attending from East Lansing and Ingham County.
Thank you, Michael. And Jessica.
Jessica Crawford, attending from West Olive in Ottawa County.
Thank you. Janine. Muted.
Oh, sorry, my internet is lagging. Jessica.
No, you were good. Jessica, you were good.
Oh,
Janine was
sorry.
muted.
I was muted, sorry.
That speaks to my
Larry.
lagging internet.
No problem. East Lansing, Ingham County.
Thank you, Janine. And then Chris.
Hi there, Chris Kahn, attending from East Lansing in Ingham County.
All right, I think I got everybody. The order just changed on me though for some reason. So I don't think I missed anyone, did I? No, that looks right to me. Excellent. Thank you much. Roll call complete. Check. Before we get into anything further, I did want to make a motion. We have a couple guests. One is a new business guest and one is an old business guest. I'd like to make a motion to move an old business to discuss the draft green building policy update up after the wetland use permit. That way we can get our two guests into the meeting, through the meeting, and then they can leave and we can go through with our discussions rather than holding anyone else up. Cheryl raised her hand but was muted.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Cheryl. All in favor? Aye.
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 Hi.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right, now someone will just have to remind me that I don't just keep going through new business on the agenda that I have over here and that we jump to old business and back. So, all right, so next we will do approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda for today, even though we just changed it? Anybody have any other additions or changes to the agenda they would like to suggest?
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Cliff.
A second.
All right, all in favor of the amended agenda? Aye.
Aye.
Or a
Aye.
hand?
Aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? It doesn't look like it. And I thought I heard R2D2 there for a moment. Just
Sorry,
barely.
that was me.
Nice. All right. So we have the agenda to move forward with amended. Next, has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda from our last meeting?
Minutes.
Sorry, minutes. They're like, it was an agenda last meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? I say we're good. Excellent. We can move to communication from citizens. Nicole, are you piloting that part of the ship?
I don't show
Brad
any
is.
no attendees here today, so we are
All right.
ready to move on.
Excellent. Oh, you know what? I have the participant list up. Brad, is that where the attendees would show up? Is over on that non-panelist little tab
Yes,
thing?
in the attendees tab. Yep.
Okay, cool. I will try to remember that next time so I don't have to harass you. Excellent. Well, I guess with no attendees, we can move past communication from citizens. And that brings us to new business. And I'll also apologize. I'm checking other screens. I'm not like watching Netflix or anything, I promise. We'll move on to the wetland use permit review. This is an East Lansing Park and Recreation project. And I believe we have, well, we have a screen, but I don't see Wendy. Did we move so fast? She's not there.
That's possible.
All right. Oh, here
There
she
she
comes.
is.
Yes,
Hi, Wendy.
Wendy, we're moving very quickly tonight, so we are ready to review the wetland use permit application for the East Lansing Parks and Rec Bridges project. And commissioners received all the application materials, including the consultant's review letter. And we are happy to have you back to the Commission on the Environment to talk about this project again.
Okay, well, did you want me to speak to it, or would you just like to, do you have questions? How do you typically approach this type of thing?
I guess let's check with sort of a temperature test. Did everyone get a chance to look at the materials and have a fairly good understanding? And in that case, I think we can just move right to questions rather than having you, take the time to present all of that, which has already been presented. So is there anybody who wants to get a quick overview? I'd say maybe raise your hand and we can do that. Otherwise, we can just move to questions if that works.
Okay, if I could take since you all have reviewed it, that kind of lets me know that we're all at the same sort of starting place. And so one of the things that I would like to, receive some feedback from the commission on is I'd like to discuss the need for wetland mitigation that is suggested. And the report indicates that we have about, I think it's 0.04 acres of wetland disturbance. And that would indicate typically that we need to look at least 0.04 acres of wetland mitigation. As you saw from the wetland consultant's letter, she suggests that because of the size of the wetland, which is minimal. I'm going to close my curtains here for a minute. Sorry about that. I was getting the evening sun in my eyes. So hopefully that's a little better for everyone. I know it works a little better for me. So the consultant had suggested that because of the size of the mitigation, as well as the public benefit of the project itself, that this might potentially be a project where we could discuss waiving the requirement for mitigation. Kathy and I have had some discussions, and one of the things that we really try and do in all of our park projects is we do look at environmental impact, and we try really hard to work environmental education into projects if we can, as well as best practices from an environmental standpoint. We are Parks and Recreation, we understand the value of parks and the importance of good, healthy parks. So one of the things Kathy and I talked about is what the options might be around mitigation. And I'm wondering if I might be able to share my screen briefly. Do I have that ability? Let me see.
Good question.
Brad, are you able to let Wendy share her screen, or Nicole?
1 second.
I just made Wendy a co-host, so I believe she should be able to share her screen, but let me know if that's not the case.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me try that. Yes, it looks like that's one of the things available to me. Okay, so are you all seeing a picture that says Harrison Meadows Park right in the center of it? Okay, so the two locations for the new bridges are shown right here. This is at the end of Colorado Drive. and then up here, which is on Riveria Drive. And the bridge on Riveria Drive crosses the Sanderson Drain. The bridge off of Colorado Drive passes the Taylor Drain. The Taylor Drain is an East Lansing regulated drain. The Sanderson Drain is an Ingham County regulated drain. In this location in particular, that we are able to put this bridge in because there is a very slender easement that allows us to put a pathway and a bridge right in this location. So any type of mitigation in this area is going to be incredibly challenging. We just don't have a whole lot of public space to do that. Now, if we look down here at this bridge at Colorado Drive, we have all of this area that is Harrison Meadows Park that we have access to. If you look at the location where this bridge is and where the impact to the wetlands potentially would be, there isn't a lot of real high quality vegetation there. It's been disturbed because it's in the drain corridor. The Taylor Drain has water flowing through there on a fairly regular basis. So what I had talked with Kathy about, and what I'm interested in hearing from the Commission on the Environment about, is in proposing that instead of doing a wetland mitigation, that we do a wetland improvement project. And I have two potential areas in mind with two very, very different goals potentially. So this particular area in the past has been a detention basin, and it is slowly filled in and it's overgrown, and right now there's a lot of cattails. Throughout this whole park is a lot of reed canary grass, a lot of shoot, my brain just took off on me for a minute. It'll come back. Buckthorn, a lot of buckthorn, and you know, just other species, plant species that just aren't things that, you know, provide a lot of benefit to a park atmosphere. So one of my thoughts is either to look at doing some improvements in this area here to return it to a retention basin, potentially even have some open water, look at replanting that area with plant material and you know, things that are more diverse, potentially native landscaping, that sort of thing. That's one area. Another potential area is right in here. We've been doing a lot of work with our volunteers in this area to remove some buckthorn, but again, this whole area is just overtaken with the buckthorn and the reed canary grass and whatnot. So I think right off the bat, there are two potential areas where we could really look at doing a wetland restoration project or a native landscape restoration project. We do have all of this space available to us, but these are the two areas that I'm most familiar with. But the challenge is because the DNR didn't require wetland mitigation, we haven't done any plans for wetland mitigation. And so I haven't really done any plans for any type of wetland improvement project either. But with the commission's support, what I would suggest is instead of mitigation, we look at a wetland improvement project, that it be one of these two locations, unless there's some extenuating reason why it needs to be somewhere else. But if these two don't work, then somewhere else in Harrison Meadows Park. And that I work with Kathy, and we probably would bring a consultant in to help us to develop a plan where we can improve the wetlands in one of these two areas. We have the potential for some signage for environmental education, and we overall just create a healthier habitat in this particular park. Now, that's not going to save all of Harrison Meadows Park. I realize that. And I realize over time it is going to require management. But I think from our standpoint, I feel like this is a project that has a greater likelihood of success, greater viability, and also greater visibility than if we were to look at doing some sort of mitigation near either of these two bridges or in another location. So I'm interested in feedback from the commission to see if you think that that would be a viable substitution for the mitigation, and then if you have any further questions.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Cheryl has a question.
Well, I don't really have a question, but I think that this is a really good idea. We could have let it go since it is such a small amount, but I feel like if we had done this with any other type of entity impacting, we probably would have asked for something. And if the city has the ability to put some type of a visible plan in place that kind of counterbalances what we're impacting, I think it's a great idea. Do you have a preference as to which of those two would be more feasible, financially feasible for the city as well?
Initially, and I will share my screen again, I wanted to make sure I like to see the people who are speaking. The area that appeals to me the most is this area right here. I really like the idea of possibly being able to get a little bit of open water in there, or at least more of a sort of boggy kind of situation. I think that could really help from the standpoint of animals as well as plants. You know, you could be looking at frogs and other, salamanders, other things like that. My hesitation with this is how close it is to these properties. And I haven't had any opportunity to touch base with any of these neighbors. And so I'd be really hesitant to move forward with anything in here until I've talked with the people in this area. So from that standpoint, that's why I suggested this alternative here, in case when I reached out to these homeowners, if there was really opposition or concern, then there would be the fallback position for right here.
That makes sense. Well, was someone else saying something?
Chris raised his hand.
Oh, go Chris.
Thanks. I was trying to find the raise the hand button, but I can't seem to find that. So thanks for the description of the options, Wendy. I did see that in the consultants write-up that I think they mentioned like a few options. One of them was potential like purchase of a wetland credit from a bank. I was wondering, has there been discussion about that and positives and negatives of that? Sorry, two-part question, but I did see there was also application for state wetland use permit, but I didn't see the permit. So I was wondering if you could talk about, is that on track to obtain that permit and et cetera?
Absolutely. It is on my understanding is the permit application is on track. Our design engineers, Wolverine, have had contact with Eagle, and I don't believe they have any questions or concerns. It's just working its way through their process. So I don't anticipate any issue with that moving forward. Regarding your second question in terms of purchase or funding for a wetland bank, this project is fully funded from the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage. I spoke with them to confirm that I could use some of the millage funds for wetland mitigation or for wetland restoration, and I can do that. I did not speak to them about whether I can use some of those funds to buy into a wetland bank. My guess is that they would be amicable to that, but I believe I would have to go through a formal approval process with them, where if I do wetland mitigation or wetland restoration, then that is something that I know is applicable for grant funds. And so there isn't any need to get further approvals. And if any of you have dealt with the county, they have kind of subcommittees for everything. Any kind of changes, you talk to the park commission, then you talk to the finance committee, then you talk to the, and so I didn't research that further because of that. But if you were interested in me doing that, I'm not opposed to looking into that.
All right, Cheryl, it's like,
Isn't the problem with the bank, though, that it doesn't necessarily benefit East Lansing?
I was having a similar recollection from,
Previous one we did.
yeah, that one up near, like the water tower. I think it might have even been the Eagle building they were planning to do, where the consultant was saying there wasn't anything in that watershed. And so we got them to do a 2-to-1 in a different watershed that's nearby. So I see that as one, that was one of my questions is would that 0.04 or whatever amount, if we did do mitigation, would that be within East Lansing or within a similar watershed, or are we just buying something in Michigan somewhere? That's one aspect of a question that I had, which I think I kind of have a good idea of the answer, but I was also, when you were showing the map, that was interesting to me. I hadn't thought about those areas, and I haven't been over there in a while, but the one that you had circled in blue, I believe it's had some work done over there recently. It seemed much more open, maybe the last time I was over there. So I don't know if that's property owners working in there. Has the city been doing anything in that section?
There is a storm drain. This is part of the storm drain system for this site. And I think there's some storm drain over here, as well as kind of a drain running along here. So I believe our crew was out there doing some work a year or so ago to clean this area out. But their goal is to ensure that water moves and that it moves not necessarily immediately away, but that eventually it's going to move away. What I'd be looking at is potentially increasing the capacity of this area to hold water, not so that it floods anybody else, but that it holds water. And then also looking at what type of plants are in there and what can we do to improve it from the standpoint of plant material and animal habitat. And so I don't think those goals are exclusive of one another, but the work that was done before really was purely for looking at moving water, as opposed to what can we do to build an environment that's beneficial to plants and animals.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions?
I was just gonna add that I think I'm in support of both. They both look great. Like you were saying about the improving the detention basin or retention basin in that area. Yeah, it seems like feedback from the adjacent neighbors would be pretty important there. But habitat improvement is, I think, a great idea in this scenario.
Thanks, Janine. Cheryl?
Kathy, just a point of reference, can we approve this and say that we would approve it with Wendy doing that homeowners questioning before doing that? And if that doesn't work out, that the alternative would be the green space, whatever that green one was. Is there a way to frame it so that we can keep this moving, but have those, have it as a backup contingency?
Yes, Cheryl. What you can do is place contingencies on your review, saying that you're approving this wetland use permit, that your understanding is that there are two options in lieu of mitigation. Rather, option number one is, and if you have a preference between those two options, so if you're kind of saying as a commission, we prefer option number one, where that would be the retention basin area, but and we can lay all this out, but we understand that there needs to be buy-in from the local neighbors around that area, or contact made. If this proves to not be a feasible option, then option two would be chosen, and that could be described as well. So I don't know that we could get all of the exact language down tonight. It's going to be a letter that will go, but it would be attached to the permit, and it would spell out those contingencies. I also want to point out that in the city's wetland use ordinance, where it talks about no net loss of wetlands, it also talks about the city needs to be working to improve wetlands that are in the city that are not necessarily in good condition. And that's not something that we've done a good job of. We've just not been in a position to be able to go out and improve wetlands necessarily. So this would be fulfilling sort of that part of the city's ordinance that has not been tried for a bit. And I think that this would be a good case to make, to say, here's an example of how we've been able to improve a wetland. We would have some understanding of what it took in terms of time and budget, and then we would have a model moving forward for possibly other areas of the city. So sometimes in making a choice like this, there are some benefits down the road that would help us move that particular needle that we've really not been able to do much work with. So I think that I appreciate that Wendy has really thought about all the possibilities here, and that one in particular offers us some benefits to replicate throughout the city in other ways at other times.
Interesting. Thanks, Kathy. I didn't realize the improvement piece was in there. That's interesting to note. Cindy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to really thank you for explaining that part of it, because I think that area, not surprisingly, has had a lot of flooding issues, and particularly on the other side of Abbott, as we all know. So I was looking at that wonderful space that you had on the map and wondering if there were other opportunities to improve the absorption versus the flow. And not for tonight, but I really am appreciative of that piece of explanation and what this opportunity might look like. So thank you.
Thank you. I think one thing I'd add as well with this particular project, I guess I have two thoughts. One is what I struggle with wetland mitigation is so many times I don't think that's done real well. You can't just go out and dig a hole and throw some plants in and say, I've created a wetland. You need to have the proper soils, the proper hydrology. You need to look at your plant material and how you're putting that in there. And so that takes some design and some work. And so I'm always real hesitant to do that just because it takes a commitment. And so one of the things we would have to look at here is we would have to spend some time looking at what plants are out there, what soils are out there, because we want this to work. Whatever we do, we want to do it right. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is I am in a rare situation with this project in that I've got extra money. So our bids came back on the bridges very, very good. And so I have grant money to do this. And so that really is exciting because I don't have to think about how can I do this cheaply or quickly. And so it is a great opportunity to look at this as a test and say, okay, This is the process we're going to follow here and find out, does that work? Is there ways we can change that? Just what is that cost for moving forward? And maybe we can come up with a, per acre cost for taking this approach. So, and we have the opportunity to do that without having to be, it's not Katie bar the doors, I'm going to be able to throw $500,000 at a, quarter acre wetland. That's not the case, but I don't have to worry about, having a severely limited budget either. So I think it's a great opportunity to try this type of a project.
Yeah, Chris.
I don't want to, I guess, stay on a topic too long here, but actually, I'm glad you talked about the kind of like the success and potential failings of wetland mitigation, because that actually is one of the positives of wetland banking is they tend to be a little more successful because they're designed and monitored, and they just tend to be a little more successful. But yeah, if there's not a good option to purchase a credit that's benefiting the city, then maybe it's not directly meeting that goal of no net loss. So, but yeah, I just thought I'd mention that is one of the benefits of a wetland mitigation bank. But if it's not a good option, it's not a good option, I understand.
Thanks, Chris. So I had a couple questions here. Well, first one was, we're talking about a 0.04 acre impact. What size are those two little polygons, the blue one and the green one? I mean, I know it's not the same as a 1-to-1 or anything like that, but just curious. If you have that information. If not, that's fine.
I don't have that information. I was trying to think of how big Harrison Meadows Park is, but a 1-to-1, I think when I calculated it out, was going to be about a 40-foot by 40-foot area, something along those lines. And I know these areas are both considerably larger than that. The pond is, I'm sorry, I've got the map up on my screen and then I didn't share the screen. So I'm like pointing with my cursor at things that nobody can see. The pond area is smaller than the other area that we were looking at, but I'm trying to think, it's hard for me to gauge that. It probably is, it might be 100 by 100. It's a pretty good size area. Trying to think of it in comparison to like a soccer field, because that's what I'm most familiar with from a size standpoint. I think it's probably about that. It's probably about 800 square feet, if I had to guess.
Okay, thanks. Michael, did you have your hand up or? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to offer that. Looking at the aerial photo, it looked like it was about 2 basketball courts. So, it might be about 10 times the size or thereabouts. And so it's considerable. But I was going to, the original reason I raised my hand was that I just wanted to speak to the possibility of education with the path being right there. I think it might be an opportunity to make people aware of what watershed they live in and where the water's going. If they treat the water well, leaving, their own yards and things like that and going into these drains and these wetlands. And so it might be good to get a water quality education component into that. In addition to I think you're talking about wetland enhancement, maybe talking about habitat and things like that. But I do think the water quality might be beneficial, being right by homeowners that are walking by and thinking about where they live and the impacts of their land use on things. So yeah, I do know that that's a stormwater basin too. So there might be some already available educational materials that you could tap into about stormwater quality and educational materials for homeowners. So yeah, that was a thought. And I do think like a 10 times the size enhancement is a pretty good value when you're just talking about a 40 by 40 foot spot, so I think that's a good thing to do. And I like the idea of having some open water in that area. So, and a little diversity and and things. So I think having open standing water allows it so that there's something for when the storm occurs, it can come in there and kind of displace that water and allow for sediment to drop out and things like that, rather than just kind of flushing through there. So having that standing water could be good for water quality too.
I like that idea too, Michael. I was thinking about that. Like we have those, you know, a lot of the cities around here, including East Lansing, like you are now in X watershed. You see them on the road, but at my job, we have those signs. They come through the GLRC with the shared website with all the, you know, watershed educational information. But we have those files, and like those existing signs could easily be adapted and cheaply made as well. Kind of what you're referring to.
Nice.
Yep, sounds good, Cliff. Thank you.
So one of the other things I thought about with some of these proposals as I was reading them, and then as you're providing these alternatives, is sort of, are we setting a precedent for someone else to come in and say, oh, I don't want to do banking, or I don't want to do mitigation. I want to update or improve some other wetland in the city. And are we okay with that? You know, I don't want this to be something where like, well, it's the city and it's such a small amount. We'll make an exception or whatever. I want us to think about what we're saying, and then what we would say if someone else came in and asked for something similar. Would we be okay with that? You know, and I think I am, generally speaking. It would depend on, of course, details and circumstances, but I want us to be making sure we're thinking about the broader wetland work that we'll be reviewing in the future. So I don't know if anyone has other concerns about that, but that's something I wanted to bring up. The other question I had was, you've mentioned other wetlands and improving other wetlands. Is it important that we stay in the same sort of complex, or is there some other highly degraded wetland somewhere in the city that we could use instead of staying in Harrison Meadows? Is there something that's just, you know, getting, I don't know, I'm not sure what the degradation would be, but is there a different spot that might be even more visible to the public, or be a better education tool, or it's more damaged and needs more help, kind of a thing?
I had not looked extensively through our park system. We do have a lot of wetland areas in our different parks. We did talk some about Fine Park and some of the areas there. There's a couple of potential areas in Fine Park as well. But that even gets into a need to communicate with more neighbors and a broader neighborhood. And so from the standpoint of a project that I felt was viable for being able to move forward, this location was better than Fine Park. We do have, there's White Park, there's the soccer complex, there's Abbott Woods. So we do, or Abbott Road Park, we do have a lot of parks that we could potentially look at this type of project in. I did really like the proximity of Harrison Meadows Park, the proximity to the original project. I also like the fact that we have a group of volunteers in our environmental stewardship program who have an interest in Harrison Meadows Park right now. They've done a good deal of work there. And I think for long-term management, it would be helpful to have people involved who had a commitment and who had a buy-in. And so I thought that Harrison Meadows Park offered that as an option as well. So I haven't looked at parks wide throughout our entire park system. We do have some other areas. I guess the key for me is I liked the proximity of this to the original impact site.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I was curious, you know, especially if this is a precedent we're setting and others may be asking to go down this path, it might be good to sort of think more broadly across the city and make a wish list kind of a thing, like, boy, I wish we could fix this one or do this over, you know, and you probably have a sense of that already, but something to think about, if this is the way we go, and make it an option for others to pursue as well. Cheryl.
Can we frame the wording of our approval to say, just because this is so small and that there is no alternative, easy alternative to actually mitigation, that this is a, special type of alternative that we're offering?
You can certainly add language to explain why you find that this alternative is acceptable and even preferable to others, including mitigation for this particular project. And in that regard, you can directly say, we don't consider this precedent setting, and that, these are our reasons for accepting this particular offer of action, to improve a wetland over actual mitigation. I think that that's perfectly valid. And I think that you probably want to bring in some of the language from the wetland consultants review that basically said, you really can waive wetland mitigation on this project. She talked about how they did do everything they could do in the design of the project to really minimize impacts, which is what we want someone to do. If you're coming in and changing the landscape or doing some kind of project, we want it designed for minimal impacts to begin with, and to really try to make this improvement without creating a detriment to the rest of the area. And I think that you can talk about how this improvement to an area is considerably larger than the area that would have been required to be mitigated as well. And I know you don't have your permit back yet from Eagle, but it's been our experience that this wouldn't have been a project that Eagle would require mitigation on. Now, of course, the city still holds a higher standard in terms of mitigation, but I think that is something that if we already had your permit, we would have that in front of us as well.
And another aspect of this as well is it is on public property and accessible to the public. And our thought is to have an educational component to it. And so if you look at others who might come forward to you and be interested in the same consideration, I think the likelihood that their sites would be in public ownership is probably low. And we also talked about how we are hoping to use this in a way that will educate us for future projects. And so it has that component to it as well. And I don't know that that would be a component that would come forward to you through another means either.
Tom, one more thing. I just wanted to point out that because we are going to have a new subcommittee working on a wetland, the ordinance and reviewing the ordinance, I think that's a great opportunity to look at those wetlands in the city and possibly look at that wetland inventory through a lens of, what wetlands are currently very healthy and which are degraded, I can't even say it tonight, sorry, which are not in as good of condition and would require some improvement in the long term. And so that we could look at that and maybe even have some kind of ranking system. So I really like that this conversation and this idea of improving an existing wetland opens us up for that greater possibility of work as you guys are about to embark on a subcommittee to look at that review. Yeah,
thank you, Kathy. All right, I saw Chris's hand, Jessica's hand, and Janine has her hand up. Let's start with Chris, because I think he had his up first, maybe? I don't know.
Thanks. I don't know if this is a dumb question, but I'm just going to ask it. So would there be any opportunity to maybe add to the language if we don't require mitigation or purchase credits or anything, that for future mitigation projects, we could like consider adding to the total acreage to account for this one. You know, I don't even know how that would be tracked if you would just like keep a database of some of these projects. And I don't know if that would conform with the ordinance, but it would be like something like a consideration that we're not forgetting about this and that we're still trying to achieve the goal of no net loss. I really identify with Tom's concerns there, although, I mean, I really like this idea of the restoration. I think it is a good kind of counterbalance, but I am concerned about the idea of like fairness and, you know, consistency in applying the ordinance and, you know, potential like precedent, somebody else coming in and saying, hey, look what the city did here. We want to do the same thing and not, you know, not mitigate. So just a little bit of a concern there.
Yeah, so Chris, your question, I think is, do we keep track of it and somehow try to roll it into something else the city does later? And so I think that's probably either Wendy or Kathy that would be able to answer that. I don't think it was a dumb question at all. It's a good one.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have an answer for that because I don't know what projects would, and I don't know how far out into the future we would hold that to say, you know, in the next 5 years, if the project on city property presents itself to do mitigation, we will require mitigation of an additional 0.04 acres. The tracking of that might be tricky. It could be, yeah, I don't know if Wendy has feedback on that in terms of projects that are coming up, but it would require that we have another project that disturbed wetland as well. So that is going to shrink the number of, you know, the projects that could potentially apply to, and it wouldn't apply to a private development project, I wouldn't think, because then the city is kind of piggybacking on a private development, which I don't think they would probably appreciate. So
we typically do everything we can to avoid wetland impacts. That's just our approach. And as I said, in most of our projects, we are looking to add an environmental component. Our Patriarch Park project that we're working on right now has a detention basin in it. We have a couple of rain gardens planned for our project where we're working on the tennis courts at Patriarch Park. So not only do we really try and avoid impacts to wetlands, we do also try and incorporate environmental aspects into our projects and environmental best practices. So I would not be opposed to looking at sort of tacking 0.04 acres onto another project. I'm with Kathy though. I'm just not sure when we might have a project come up that we could, you know, attach it to.
That's fair. All right, Jessica had a question.
Yeah, so my question is just a clarifying question. So from my understanding, it sounded like there wasn't really any feasible type of mitigation along that Sanderson drain, but I just wanted to clarify that. What about along the Taylor drain? Was that like looked into if mitigation was also a possibility, or if it was also going to be very strenuous and not really that reasonable? Because I kind of mimic the same concerns as Tom and Chris that, you know, if we're going to set this precedent, I think it would be reassuring to know that all possibilities for mitigation would be exhausted and not really that feasible to do.
We see your screen, Wendy, but you are muted.
Okay, I can't do two things at once, apparently. I can't share a screen and unmute at the same time. Okay, to answer the question about if we looked at mitigation in the other site. This is the other site right off of Colorado Drive. There could potentially be locations or options for mitigation on either side here. And I'll be honest, I haven't, there's a lot of vegetation down through here. And so I haven't tromped down in and looked at just, how we might be able to accomplish that. The wetland, from what I'm remembering, is basically right down along the bottom of this drain here. So I would assume what we'd probably look to do is maybe widen out an area of the drain, potentially over here. I think it's possible we could do that. I would stay away from this side because it's awful close to the trail. I am a bit concerned that you have this junction between the two drains. And anytime you have that happening, you risk, erosion and that sort of thing. But there could potentially, we could look at some mitigation here. And I guess we could look a little further down, more over in this area. So I think we could potentially look at mitigation over there. I guess from my standpoint, again, I get real concerned about the, successful mitigation. If we were going to do that, I'd want to be sure it's going to be successful.
Making sure I'm not muted. Thank you, Jessica. That's a good question. That sort of spurs my mind on to, could you do both with the money? But we need to get to other people who have their hands up. So Janine, you had your hand up next, I think.
I was just going to note, I do think there is, because this is an access point that we're basically developing for people to use the trail. I think this is a real opportunity to talk about wetland improvements and the fact that we're improving another area within this ecosystem or this habitat in the park. And I guess when you were talking about the drains, to me, it sounded like you're talking about flow and keeping the water moving, right? Like we saw that work that happened on those drains. So I just don't know like how feasible it would be to do a good wetland project, given, that's kind of where those two drains converge, like you just said. And so it doesn't look like those other projects are that far away and they're within the same area. So I think there's some opportunities to talk to the, to make this a good environmental education project. Part of that is educating people about, we have access, we're improving our city's, recreation areas, but in turn, we're also, trying to limit the amount of wetland impacts we make. But in this case, we, couldn't completely accomplish that. So we're making improvements in the park. And here's the area where we did that. So I see that as somewhat more of a benefit in some ways than trying to find another wetland area, maybe in a different area of the city. But that's just something I thought that would maybe be a good tie-in for people to understand that, we make these improvements, but there's impacts to the environment in relationship to them. And here's how we're trying to counter that by doing a wetland improvement project.
Nice. Thank you, Janine. Michael also had his hand up or has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Tom and Janine. I agree with your statement. I was going to kind of say a similar thing. I think it's nice to have a site that's right by the site that has impacts on the habitat and the drainage and the water quality that's going to be going into that drain. If we're concerned about mitigation, we might look at, instead of digging in the margins of the drain, maybe digging in the margins of that stormwater basin that was shown in blue and making that just a little bit larger with the goal of enhancement. But at the same time, if we're getting some mitigation out of that at the same time, that'd be great. I mean, there may be the possibility to get a marginal improvement around the edge that where you're just doing a little more excavation into the basin to create open water, but maybe there's a spoil pile there for when they created the basin, you're hauling a little bit of that soil away and creating a little wetland there too. So there may be a potential site here for mitigation in addition on the site and somewhere where it's not going to create erosion right in the drain itself. So that was my thought as we were talking about this. So I guess that would be my hope, that as you're looking at the consultant doing this enhancement piece here and you have the funding for that, maybe just speak to them to say, is there a possibility to make this marginally larger and create something more?
I like that. All right, I think we've had some good discussion. Are there other questions or discussion, or should we try to craft ourselves a motion with all that we've just talked about that I can only remember a small fraction of? Which is why Kathy's taking notes, I hope.
What notes? No, I am taking notes. I've got them. So let me run this by you. What I'm hearing is you are interested in making a motion to approve a wetland use permit for this project. In lieu of mitigation, there are two improvement sites identified, and one will take priority over the second, but requires interface with the neighborhood. And so there's a second option that will be included in the contingency for improvement. And that there will also be an educational component to the improvements that are established in this area. That's pretty general to begin with. So, and I don't know that you have to get into super specific details as long as you've included everything, the intent of everything that you're wanting to include.
I think that sounds good to me from what I remember, but I also do like Michael's suggestion there at the end of potentially adding restoration and mitigation at the same location. Then you're not losing that 0.04 potentially, but you're also getting restoration if it's financially feasible.
How will we write the language to determine what is or isn't financially feasible in that regard?
I think the way I picture it, and maybe this is all wrong, but that we say conduct the restoration maybe being the priority, and if it's able based on site conditions, including mitigation as well. I don't know. Maybe we don't need to say the financial portion. I'm just trying to see what makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, we could use the term practical. Feasible. I like those alternatives. Those are good words.
You just say keeping within the budget, because that would address the, it sounded like Wendy said there was a bit of a slush fund there, not to put it that way, but you have more money than you ordinarily have in these situations. And so maybe just keeping it within that, but trying to do what Michael suggested along the way so that you discover and identify a mitigation option while you're doing the rest of the work there.
Would you be good with language that was close to, improvement to site number 1 with restoration and potential increase to the restoration area if budget is available and the increase is feasible and practical?
Yeah.
So then you would move to option number 2. Go ahead.
I have a quick question. do we like, let's say if this is, you know, we're trying to include that potential restoration or the additional mitigation if possible to, in part to make sure that the restoration is good and then also not to set that precedent of, you know, like we're no net loss or whatever. So if we use that language of potential additional restoration, does that still cover us as far as like no net loss or mitigation terms? I just would want to make sure that we're using the right wordage so that if someone else is looking through what we approve, that it's, you know, it's good. I don't know. I probably didn't explain that very well, but
Are you thinking like something that says and rather than or?
I was thinking instead of the word or enhanced restoration, I would say like or enhanced restoration, which would include mitigation or something. Just throwing in that word mitigation just so that it's there. It's a possibility.
So I'm going to offer, maybe rather than using the word restoration, that we're using the language of wetland improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to everyone rather than restoration? So that if we're using the language of wetland improvements in an existing wetland, then we are also able to open that language up to say, and if there is potential to increase the size of that existing wetland through additional mitigation during the restoration.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I like the word improvement much better.
Hopefully you can all remember what I just said. The good thing is that these are all taped now, so I can go back and watch it. So, Wendy, how does that sound from your standpoint in knowing that you're the one who has to take something like this, a contingency like this, out to bid and to find, you know, and to be able to communicate that with someone who's going to do the work? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think what I'd look at doing is getting a wetland delineation first, just to see what portion of that currently is wetland, because just the fact of doing the restoration may itself create wetland. So it may not even be necessary to make that area larger, but just by doing our improvement, we may add wetland. So what I would do first is a wetland delineation, and then I'd look at working my development from there. And if we can expand that wetland, work that into the plan. And I'm comfortable with that approach. And I appreciate you asking that question. Thank you.
I'm willing to move all of this if Kathy can figure out the wording.
I think we'll create it so these contingencies, both contingencies include the educational component, because that has been clearly very important. The first site, as I understand it, is the blue area, and that's the area that people are most interested in pursuing to begin with. And if that turns out to not be feasible and practical for reasons that you know, it's so close to those properties, adjacent properties, or for other reasons, then option 2 would be the green area. We will attach a map, I think, to the permit to clearly indicate which area is which, and maybe come up with something better than the blue and the green area. Some name or some label, right? We can do that. And then option 2 will mimic option 1 in the same way, in that the improvement of the wetland, if there's the potential to increase that wetland area, if budget is available and the increase is feasible and practical, then that would be included.
That sounds good to me. My one question is that green area upland, or is that still I mean, it's next to the wetland behind it. So I'm not sure that the mitigation, the additional mitigation factor would be as easy, maybe. I don't know. Just trying to think.
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with that site. I helped haul a bunch of buckthorn out of it when I was helping out with volunteering one point. I do know that part of it is wetland. I do think some of it is upland too. So I think it's a mix.
Okay.
Site. But I wouldn't know exactly where those delineations are. I just remember seeing that it was some of that reed canary grass coming up into the buckthorn closer to the trail. And so that area is pretty large and she's got her circle around there. So I think it would entail both wetland and upland.
Good.
I don't know that this needs to be included in the letter that goes with the approval of the wetland use permit, but we can talk about the need for delineation of whichever site is chosen ultimately.
That makes sense. I think we have, Cheryl has a motion. Is that right, Kathy?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Cindy. All in favor of the information we just went through and the decision we make that Cheryl made the motion on? In favor would be aye.
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 And I didn't see, yeah, well, I think I have to ask anyway. Any opposed? Sounds like motion carries. Thank you. It's good discussion. Hopefully Adam is still awake.
I will.
Great discussion, still here.
All right. Thank you, Wendy, for your time and consideration with this and taking the extra effort to look through those options and provide us with some tangible things to react to. Appreciate that.
Thank you all. I appreciate your feedback and working with us, and I look forward to seeing what we can come up with. Have a nice
Wendy.
evening.
Excellent. Thanks. All right. So now we're skipping a new business item to move to old business, and we'll be back to new business in a little bit. The old business item we're coming to is the 4.1, which is the draft green building policy update. And I need to make sure I get there.
I'm not sure everyone has met Adam. Adam is somewhat newer to the city. I think, did you start in the midst of COVID, Adam?
Started exactly about 1 year ago, last June. Yeah.
So a lot of people have not actually met you in person.
I have not met a lot of my colleagues in person either. Yeah, we're still getting there.
And so if you would, just so our commission is familiar with the work you do and your position, I think that would be helpful in relation to the DDA so that we start the conversation sort of where your role is and the role of the DDA.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody, Adam Cummins. I'm the Community and Economic Development Administrator with the City of East Lansing. I'm also the staff resource with the DDA. And so that's what brings me here this evening. In the past year or so, my position has really been focused on economic recovery efforts, specifically downtown. We've implemented a lot of placemaking strategies and initiatives, trying to draw people downtown in the safest way possible during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're hoping some of these things, these initiatives that we're testing out stick and we can continue implementing them in the long term. So fingers crossed. If you haven't made your way down to Albert Avenue, I encourage you to do so. Check it out. We just closed both lanes and put some pretty cool seating down there. So check it out if you have a chance. Other than that, like I said, I'm the staff resource for the DDA and also the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, the Downtown Management Board, and dabble a little bit in community development block grants as well. So yeah, and this evening, Kathy asked me to join just to discuss some of the DDA comments in response to the draft green building policy. So I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to review the letter from Peter Dewan, the chair. Yeah. Overall, DDA was very supportive of the policy. They just had those few comments, more clarifying comments than anything else. Specifically, are there specific incentives that the green building policy kicks in? Are there specific incentives to help offset with those costs? Incorporating LEED standards into building design and construction. And the third one was cost estimates for green building design and construction. Are those available? Can those be incorporated into the policy? I did go back and review some of the tapes, and there was one other item one other comment, pretty minor, was just the wording in one of the paragraphs says we encourage and require these certain items. And again, this was just clarifying, do we encourage it or do we require it? I went back, read it. I read it as it's required, and we're encouraging the green building design standards by requiring them, essentially. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully I can answer them. Oh, you guys are making this way too easy on me.
Sorry, guys, I did not see a copy of that letter, the comments, and I'm trying to find it. Kathy, was that in the packet?
Yes, so it's page 6 of 12 of that
Okay. All right.
link under that item. Yeah. And it's got the 3 bullets
Okay.
that Adam mentioned.
Okay, great.
I have a quick question. So, for example, let's say if we are identifying particular incentives that developers could use, is that something that they want us to include in this policy, or is that just something that like we can direct them to on a website? I guess what are the requests on that end? Because I would be kind of concerned, like, well, what if we identify some incentives and not others? Would that show that the city is favoring, one organization over another? So I guess that would be my question.
It's a great question. And, I kind of briefly spoke to Kathy about this, identifying those specific incentives that are available, even the cost estimates. I don't know that I would personally incorporate that into the policy. Otherwise, you're going to be updating the policy quite frequently as those all change. And so maybe it's directing people to, a guidance document or something to that extent that has a list of those incentives. My understanding was the clarifying comment was, does this apply to any incentive? For example, the Michigan Community Revitalization Program, MCRP, through MEDC, that is a state incentive. It's not necessarily a local incentive. It does require local support for a developer to pursue that incentive, but it's not a local incentive. So does that apply to this policy? And I think that's more of what they were looking for.
So Michael, maybe because we kind of helped to draft the policy, I'm trying to think back, but did we intend for it to apply to incentives that were not provided via the city?
I think the way we worded it was municipal funding, or I believe that's the way we were intending it to be, was that the city was providing funding. But I think it might be clear if we thought about what those incentives are. I guess that's kind of what they're telling us. And so I could see that maybe excluding some specifically by name might be helpful too, to say not county or state funding, but municipal funding or that type of thing.
And I believe in the 2009 draft, it does outline a few incentives, TIF, a couple others I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull that up right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that a lot of those incentives are usually for use for improving the site or taking care of contamination, and there's, you know, specific uses for them that wouldn't be uniquely for all types of things that someone could do to make a green building meet some standards. So yeah,
It doesn't have it here in the policy, but maybe there's a definition section. Because in the policy from 2009, it just says municipal incentives.
See.
But it would be
think,
helpful to know, like from a education standpoint, for incentives that the city provides at a municipal level. At this point, like for funding, is there a relationship like where it could be like a partial funding by local municipal incentives and state incentives? Do you guys get into that situation where it could be like multiple incentives being applied to a project?
Yeah, absolutely. Even TIF is state and local capture.
okay.
Yeah, and then there could be a TIF, a brownfield plan approved on top of the MCRP grant through MEDC that's approved as well. So there's definitely combinations.
Are there scenarios where there's only municipal incentives and not state?
Yeah, so a brownfield plan could be local only capture. And I say that, but I'm not sure if we're speaking the same language. So the brownfield plan, the TIF, is, you know, it's technically it's state and local, I guess we should say. Yeah, I don't, top of my head, I don't think there's ever a situation I've encountered where the developer has pursued a brownfield plan with state only capture. That makes sense. But there are brownfield plans that are local only capture.
We were thinking, I think, that these incentives where they received some type of incentive through the municipality, through the city, and if they, in addition to, received some type of incentives through the state or county, that's great. But we were focusing more on the municipal incentives. Okay.
And that's the way I read it as well. So maybe it's clear enough. So.
But that kind of does it cast a broad enough net? I mean, I think that's part of it too.
I think if the
big of a net.
Yeah, I think if the objective is for the green building policy to kick in for any municipal incentive, you know, 15% or above total project costs, I think that's a broad enough net. And then, you know, we can provide some kind of other resource guidance document, something to that extent that kind of identifies the current most recent incentives available. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound like maybe, is this something that city staff could help us with, Kathy? Do you think there would be some city staff that would be able to identify these various incentives that have kicked in historic projects? I know we've had some turnover, but I know we've also got some folks who've been around for a bit and they know what we have and haven't used in the past, and we could maybe identify those.
I feel like because that's a planning function more than anything, I think, Adam, you'd have to weigh in on that, whether
yeah, actually, I've been tasked to do exactly that. So I'm happy to help.
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Yeah, we're scratching our head, and I was just thinking that I'd like to be able to address this, and I just want to figure out what type of resources we have to do that so that we're doing it in a way that meets DDA's interest and is clear to developers at the same time, you know, really moving forward this policy so it's benefiting the city by getting a more substantial review process and keeping those high standards we had in the first policy, but also developing some newer standards and really locking them down to the existing codes and all. I think I came and spoke to DDA about 1.5 years ago, and they seem very supportive of it. So I'm glad to hear there's still a lot of support. And I appreciate the feedback on how to improve it a little bit. I think we can make it a little bit better. And that way it'll have, you know, more likelihood of success. That's our whole goal here, is to have a successful policy. So yeah, it'd be great if we could connect with you on that. I don't know when we need to do it all right now in this meeting today, but
Yeah, no, since I am new, my manager and I discussed this previous to the green building policy that I needed to get caught up to speed on all the incentives that are available. So I will move that up on the to-do list and work with you guys, work through Kathy and get that done.
okay. Well, thanks for coming to tonight's meeting. What's that?
I don't know if based on what we're hearing that we need to change the language. I think it was
Yeah.
like around clarification around how this would be interpreted and applied.
Good point.
Yeah, and I've gone down the path before of trying to provide, some cost estimates for green building, for LEED. Obviously it's out there, but again, that was very fluid and it wasn't consistent. So I'm not quite sure how to handle that comment, if at all. But that was one of their other comments was, can we provide some type of cost estimate for the cost of this? I don't know. Is it still around 2 cents per square foot, something to that extent?
Yeah, I think it's and it varies because this ordinance has a very minimal level of green building requirements on some sites, but a larger one on other sites, and so it's kind of hard to fraction out that 2 cents. Like you say, we were saying 2% higher cost is kind of the way we worded it, but I mean, it kind of equates probably to similar things. So, yeah, I think it's just hard to kind of nail that down because if it's on the lower end of our scale, you only got to get 10 green building points rather than get it certified. Almost there's a big difference in cost there too. You're probably talking fractions of that 2 cents when you're down at that 10 green building points, and when you're up at 40 points, you're talking more of that full 2 cents. So yeah, just how you word that to make it understandable is challenging.
Right, that's a challenge.
Yeah, but we could probably work on it and come up with a way.
Okay.
Adam, do you see all of these areas basically being answered in a guidance document as opposed to changing the language in the policy at this point?
I personally, that's the approach I would take. Yeah. Again, instead of constantly updating the policy each time an incentive changes or comes online, offline, cost estimates change, just a separate guidance document to point folks to.
Okay, because that document could be revised over time to say there are new incentives or this incentive is no longer available, something like that. So
yeah, and maybe it's not even a document, it's just a web page with a list of resources.
Yeah, like a fact sheet, almost like something that you can hand out to developers even. That would be like a Cliff Notes version of the policy and some of these other questions that they may have.
Right. Easily updated, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So one other thing I'll throw out there, I did pass the policy along to the city attorney's office, and they're going through it very carefully because of course we can't exceed state building code requirements. And so they're just making sure that under any of the scenarios that could be in play with this, that we wouldn't be in any violation with that. So they will come back to us after doing some additional research and may have to propose some minor language changes if that's the case. But we'll let them go through that. It's better to have that done before it goes to city council and have any changes that need to be made while we're working on this guidance document.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael.
I was just thanking Kathy for doing that. That's all. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, I do have a meeting with DDA this Thursday, so I'll take this back to them. And if there's happens to be any other comments, I'll touch base with Kathy and let her know.
That sounds great. We really appreciate it. We're pretty excited to get this policy completed.
It's a great thing, and it's pretty critical that we do it sooner than later, right?
Yes.
So, job well done, everybody.
Thank you. I just want to thank Adam, because he had this not just on one meeting, but I think 4 meetings altogether. 4, yes.
Yeah.
4 DDA meetings. So when you talk about covering your bases, he definitely covered the bases for you guys, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for your time. And again, let me know if there's anything else I can do to help.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
All right.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Adam.
Thank you,
Bye.
Adam.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
So I'm thinking we don't need a motion to move forward with this because this is already something we're moving on and in the process with, right? This is just sort of a part of the development of this. Okay, good.
And I would suggest, as a subcommittee start meeting again, that when this subcommittee might want to choose to meet once the attorney's review is done, because that way you could cover both, you know, the guidance document and any changes that might be required or maybe aren't required, either way. So you might be able to get it done with just maybe one meeting and be ready to move on to city council pretty quickly. So getting very close.
Great.
Good. So I think that brings us back to new business from old business to talk about the summer meeting schedule. Often we have a month in the summer where we make the decision we will not be meeting based on just everyone's busy in the summer, vacations, time away. So we want to sort of look at the summer months, and I think that's what Kathy had for that agenda item report was the meeting dates planned out for us. So we can talk about if that's something we want to do again this year, or if, you know, we're so excited that we'll be together again soon that we want to just keep meeting and not push one out. Or when Kathy, Cheryl, and I were talking earlier, we could also sort of leave all of them on the table with the potential to drop one as long as we have, was it 2 or 3 weeks notice for them, Kathy? I don't remember. So we would maybe just do some communication ahead of time to make a decision. I see Cheryl has her hand up, so I probably said something wrong.
No, this was just a reminder that if we don't change any of these, or even if we do, not everybody can schedule all their vacations at the same time. And commissioners do have the ability to be absent from 3 meetings within what their term of office, Kathy, or
Within a consecutive year. So
within the year,
within a running 12-month period.
Right. So, you know, it's not like just because we choose to not meet in August that all of a sudden everybody has to go on vacation in August.
Fair. Good clarification.
Speaking of which, I'll be on vacation in August.
Thank you,
No.
Ann. So noted. So noted.
Once we go back to in-person meetings, will there be an option if one is away and they wanted to like Zoom in? Will that be on the table, or will the Zoom option be completely gone?
We don't know yet in terms of whether that will be an option as being a voting member if you are, you know, coming in. We have done that on occasion for a member who was on vacation, and we used Skype when we were way before COVID, and we only did it a few times. I don't think we ever had anything that we voted on using someone who was on a Skype call at the time. It tended to be more informational, or so they could be a part of what was being discussed. Those are all the kind of tricky details that we're going to be finding out more about, because of course there are these ideas of hybrid meetings where even some members of the public could be coming in remotely to the meeting as opposed to being in person. So we'll hopefully have some more guidance on that shortly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That is a good question, though. So I guess generally speaking, are we interested in taking one off the table right now? Or are we still leaning towards keeping them all? And we do still have the option to take one out later in the summer. Yeah, sure.
I also think, Kathy, didn't you clarify that you really didn't see any more of these watershed issues or that coming down the pike immediately? So, we could potentially get rid of one of the months.
Certainly. So usually we have some kind of heads up that we know, we actually thought this last project that we talked about this evening was coming to last month's meeting and it wasn't ready yet. And so that's why we didn't have any business for that, and the DDA letter was not ready either. So that certainly can happen in a given month where kind of the things that we've sort of looked ahead or planned out to are not quite ready to go to commission yet. I'm not aware currently of any developments that are impacting wetlands that are coming towards us in any period of time right now. So that could change, but I would think that if we're only getting notified right now that that's a potential, the process itself takes some substantial time. So I think that we would still be able to get a meeting in.
Any strong opinions out there?
Do you have any sense of when the legal counsel is going to be back with the comments on the item we just covered, the green building policy?
I don't. He gave us a brief response, just saying that they're, checking things and that they know that this is something that we've been working on for a while, so they're not going to take too much time. They're jumping right on it, but he didn't give me a timeline. So,
Do you know, Kathy, if he gets back to us in the next month, do you sense that this could go in front of the council like by mid-August, or would it need more time than that?
there's potential, but we'd have to look at what the council dates are for summer because those start to get a little scarce as well.
Okay.
I could look that up real quick and we could see what our options are.
I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks at the end of August, like right before Labor Day. So I would love if it does go in front of the council that I can be present. So, but I'm not sure exactly, like we can't anticipate that right now.
So right now I'm only seeing a council meeting on August 10th. I don't know if there's potential for that to change. Nicole, I don't know if you're still on the line. If you're not, that's not a problem. But if you are, do you have any sense of whether any of the August City Council schedule is looking to be changed? And she may not be on right now. She's back up, so I would not blame her for not being on at this point. But I can find out for you. I know that doesn't allow you to make a decision like right now immediately, but right now the schedule shows that it's August 10th for City Council meeting in August. So realistically, I think we would be looking more like September 7th or something like that.
Okay.
Is it possible just to leave these on the calendar? And then I really liked what you did in May, Kathy, by saying, we don't have anything that we really need to cover, and then just telling us we were not meeting that month. I thought that worked really well. I don't know if that is good for others' plans, but I certainly didn't mind that approach.
Yeah, that absolutely can be the approach. We can leave them on and we can make a determination. Like Tom said, we can make it try to make it maybe 2 weeks beforehand, that it's not looking as though there's going to be business that is necessary for that meeting.
Because that could happen 2 months in a row, presumably, right? I don't know. I mean, maybe there's nothing in July or nothing in August, so.
That is true. That could happen. All right. I mean, I think I'm not hearing anyone saying they're itching to drop one, and we can base it on need. If we don't need one, we can drop one. I think that seems totally reasonable. I don't think we need to make any motions or anything along those lines if that's what we decided. But just in an unofficial way, is everyone okay and comfortable if that's how we move forward? Okay, I see nodding heads and thumbs.
No action needed then.
All right, good deal. Now we can go back to old business. We're bouncing all over the place. And this is the subcommittee assignments, which is highly suspenseful. No one has seen it except Kathy, I think, or at least no one on this meeting. So we get to all find out where we're going.
I'm going to ask Brad to share the screen. This is highly technical Word document. Not really. It just shows you who's in what subcommittee based on your choices. Some people did choose more than one subcommittee. And we have one subcommittee that has 4 people. The rest are, as you can see, 2 to 3. So sustainable building may need a little extra help at some point, but I think that because the work that you guys have done is kind of culminating at this point, maybe it will be fine just to work through. And you're going to be interfacing again with Adam and planning staff, so that may be just fine for now to have just the 2 of you on that committee. Renewable energy, we've got Chris, Jessica, Cindy, and Tom. On the wetland ordinance review, green infrastructure review, we've got Cliff, Cindy, and Tom. And on the multifamily and recycling, and I've added organics to that because there is some movement in that area, and it's a good fit and it makes sense. We've got Cheryl, Jessica, and Ann. Did I get all that right? Raise your hand or tell me if. Okay, good deal. So we have these assignments. I will also add this information to the commission's roster. I didn't want to share that screen since the roster also has your phone numbers and your home addresses, and I figured that wasn't necessary to share that screen in a public meeting, but I will send that all out to you so you all have that and you know who's in what subcommittee, and you also have your contact information. Looks like Janine has a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if after, I think the sustainability piece can blend into these other groups, but if we get into a situation where, geez, we really don't have as much work to do anymore, I think the green infrastructure one is one I'm always interested in too. But right now, I think keeping it the way it is good.
Yeah, similarly, I had a question about the green building one and this guidance document that was sort of referenced. Would that be the responsibility, probably in conjunction with Adam, of keeping that updated? Would that be like a regular thing that this group would do, or would that fall on Adam's shoulders?
I feel like really we just need to answer those questions that they raised. I don't know that it has to be extensive, but there may be questions that come out of, once the policy is in effect again, like how we kind of ran into those issues of the past. So maybe there'll be more that will come out of this, like other guidance or other questions that people may have. I don't know, Michael, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. There might be some more guidance that needs to come out of it. I'd really like to wrap up this piece with Adam's help, and it's really kind of hard, Tom, to predict, 5 years from now, we need to update a guidance document if our subcommittee is still going to exist. But I think it would come back to the commission, the environment, and the commission, the environment would decide how they had to help update that or something. But if the subcommittee does dissipate, I think you could still react and come up with something, just like we did. We came up with something new for the 2009 policy because we needed to. it really, the group at the time would have to determine that, I think.
That's fair. I just wasn't sure how often these incentives change. Is it like quarterly where that list would be outdated super fast and it needs to have a group that's paying attention to those incentives that are, if that guidance document is going to list out the available incentives. It's way outside my sphere, so I have no idea how that works.
I think the intent would be for the policy to kind of lead, and it's broad. It talks about municipal incentives, and this would just be a guide, because I don't want to get into a situation where somehow the policy isn't being implemented because like a user guide or fact sheet is out of date. So it should really be that the policy drives at its municipal incentives. I think they were just trying to get some clarification from us, and as much information we can provide to these developers out the gate, the better. I don't know. It's kind of my thought. I don't know, Michael, if you agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what they want. And I don't think that these incentives will change all that quickly. You're talking about like state laws that would need to change, and those take a little while.
I think one way to approach this too, to sort of have that connection over time, is to treat it a little bit like the stormwater update that you get yearly from engineering and the update that you get on the work projects. So I think that if we were to set a yearly time where planning comes and reports out on, how this has been working, what has come of the policy, how it's been applied, where it's been applied, what it looked like, and just a presentation and overview, and to do that start out on a yearly basis, I think would probably be more than adequate to begin with, and it would create some accountability also. So, if you're going to have to report out on these things at a certain point in time to the Commission on the Environment, and maybe we can suggest even when that is, then they can be tracking it right from the get-go and know that you're going to be expecting that report in December every year or September, whatever you think is appropriate. But I really like the regularity of the stormwater update that you receive every November. It's something you count on. It's something that, every year I see people feeling a little bit more familiar with the language and the presentation, and the questions become a little bit more detailed because it's an education piece as well, right? So I think that the more regular kinds of check-ins we can do like that, I think that's a really good way to stay on top of it.
Sounds good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there additional discussion on, I think this is another one we don't have to do any go to motions or anything. This is just us agreeing that these are the subcommittees we're going to work on, and I think it looks good. Thank you, Kathy, for that, and thank you everyone for providing your preferences to Kathy. Hopefully nobody's too upset that they got cut from the team.
Is there a sense of when subcommittees might be able to meet again? I know we kind of brought that topic up earlier. Is that known, or is it still really unknown?
Well, if we want to wait till we can meet in person, then I think we're looking at least August at that point. But if we're talking about trying to do a Zoom subcommittee meeting, we can do that now. We have the ability to do more than one Zoom public meeting at this point, which we couldn't do previously, so that made it very difficult. So we would have to check the times and make sure there's a time available for a particular subcommittee. I would say, especially in the case of the Sustainable Building Subcommittee, you guys may need to meet before we can meet in person, so we may have to exercise that option of a public Zoom meeting. But in some of the other cases, you may or may not want to wait a little bit more until we have a little more guidance about whether it's in person or Zoom.
I think that makes sense. We kind of play it by ear. Be ready to have one if we need one. Excellent. Anybody have any other questions about the subcommittee, or are we ready to move?
I just have a comment.
Go,
I am
Cheryl.
so excited that the wetland people are going to do this and teach those of us who know nothing about wetlands what we really should be doing here.
You get your socks wet. That's a wetland.
Right.
And I should have mentioned that Diane Martin, who's our wetland consultant from ASTI Environmental, is on board with helping the subcommittee and with doing a presentation to the commission. So she was looking at later summer, fall to do that, and she's putting that together for us. So she already has suggestions in terms of updating the ordinance that I think you're gonna be able to really work with and get something moving.
Nice. All right, we can move to staff reports. Anyone want to grill Kathy on staff report topics? Can't be this easy, can it?
For commissioner reports, I wanted to potentially put a couple commissioners on the spot, if that's okay. Two things. So we did have another meeting of TASK, which is the Capital Area Sustainability Partnership, and Cheryl, Jessica, Cliff, and Ann were all at that large meeting. And Ann and Cliff and I are all on the steering committee for that group. And I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Cliff. The organization that he is providing, the facilitation that he is providing, the guidance, the sheer volume of words on paper that he is providing to help clarify the vision of this group and to help move this forward and to really put this in a workable framework that people can come together and start solving, some of these sustainability issues in the region. He's just done such a great job, and I see Ann nodding and everybody nodding that has had any experience with it. So I want to make all the other commissioners aware of he's pretty fantastic, and we really appreciate the time and effort that he's put into that. So and I also wanted, and I'm going to embarrass her, but I was hoping Jessica could share her news about her new position and describe it to everybody, because it's super exciting and I'm like super thrilled for her, but I think all of you should know about it too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I graduated and I got a job with the state of Michigan in Eagle in their energy services unit. And I'm going to be their community programs coordinator. And pretty much what that's going to be is I'm going to be working directly with communities to provide them technical and financial assistance on adopting energy efficiency and renewable energy practices. So I'm super stoked, and I feel like that job is going to be very applicable for the work that we do here. So very excited. And I'm also excited to see some of you people in the building once we're able to open up again.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So
Congrats.
if you're working in Con Hall, that means you're not going to move out of East Lansing and you can stay on the commission?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
So now you're going to have to leave Ottawa County. You're in the wrong county.
I know.
Nice. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That is really amazing. I know that first job is like so important like that. So that's really awesome. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other commissioner announcements?
Oh, I don't know if I've brought this up before, but it's going to be relevant to the new green infrastructure subcommittee. But the audit of the green infrastructure barriers, that like the code audit that we performed at Meridian Township through my work at Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, Once we did that audit, we realized that there wasn't much sense in moving forward on replacing the language within the code until we had some sort of standardized, manual guidance document, some suggested language that others in the area could borrow from too. Because one of the benefits of all the MS4 stormwater groups working, or communities working together, is that consistency. So developers have a pretty good idea when they're working in the Lansing area. It's not going to be a huge departure once you cross Waverly Road, or once you cross, the township and East Lansing divide. And so for the last few months, I've been putting together some boilerplate. It's like this 90-page, just kind of boring document full of code language that is pre-cleared to be friendly for green infrastructure. And a lot of it was sourced from the Wisconsin Sea Grant and from a planning professor at UC Davis who specialized in this stuff. So it's not like, I wouldn't trust it if I just came up with it, but it's like what the experts say is good, but then parsed for what makes sense for Michigan. And, there's some things that, it's different, depending on the soils and all that and the climate. So the intention of that document is for communities to use it a la carte, essentially. Like they'll go through the audit process, identify where these code barriers exist, and then reference this new document to kind of give themselves a starting point. Every community is going to be different. They're going to have different planning commissions and different personalities. They're going to want language to be different. But at least the first thing that they see that can help inform those decisions are coming from a standardized kind of shared place. And so we're still working through that at the subcommittee level within the stormwater group and seeking some input from area planners and stuff. I think, getting some input from East Lansing would be good too. I just reached out to Meridian. Do they have a new planning director? Because they had some retirements and stuff over there. Clinton County Planning Department just looked at it. And yeah, it's in a good place. There's still a little bit to go, but just wanted to let you guys know once we get going on that review internally at East Lansing, the next step should be easier with that document. And it's nothing that anyone has to use, and planning commissions can throw it away if they want to. But at least there's a resource where you're like, okay, well, we know that X code is prohibiting or is silent on green infrastructure. What do we do now? We have at least some suggested next steps for that, and just some boilerplate they can drop in or adapt or whatever they want to do with it. So it's coming along, and I don't remember if I mentioned that new component. I know I've talked about the audit a few times, but this new guidance document should be pretty helpful to us as a commission.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't recall you mentioning that. The audit, yes. I don't remember the guidance document. So great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I can share a draft with you guys too. It's still pretty rough, but I'm having my job title is planner, but I'm not a planner in the traditional sense. And so like I want to know from planners, like, is this workable? Is this something you can take? I mean, I think it is. It's literally just language you can copy and paste. But the more feedback I get from practitioners and stuff is beneficial. But I can share it with all of you as well.
I would not be able to provide any kind of educated opinion on it because that is outside of my sphere. But I think if folks are interested in it and you're willing to share, that'd be great. Michael, you're unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to share? Oh,
nope. Myself unmuted.
Then he muted. I was hoping he had an announcement for us. All right. Any other announcements?
One more. I don't know if I've mentioned this either. I think I mentioned it to some other group, if not this one. But I just redid my back lawn with a bee-friendly turf mix. And it's durable, and I didn't want to mow it. My wife just mowed it while I was on this meeting. It's like super low maintenance, and the fescues fold over instead of standing straight up. So you can kind of get by that whole 8-inch nuisance grass thing. It's kind of like a meadow. But I got the Michigan Wildflower Farm in Portland. It's just seed mix, and it's like they said there's not a native solution that is really durable enough for high traffic areas. Like I park a trailer on it and stuff. And they said, but this is pretty much close. It's like native to upper Midwest, but not this area exactly or something, but it's pollinator turf grass. And so if anyone is interested in having, like there's areas I want to turn into pocket prairies and stuff on my lawn, but there also are areas where I still want to, step and stuff. And so this seems to be a good kind of middle ground of non-turf, but not just pure black-eyed Susans or something,
Nice.
So if you're interested, the bee-friendly mix, it worked out. It's pretty sweet.
How long has it been growing?
We planted it 2 months ago, probably. It took a little longer to establish, but it was kind of cold when we did it. I mean, there was a few frosts and stuff, after we planted it. But it once it warmed up, it took off pretty well. It was probably just on the edge of the nuisance grass height ordinance, which is why I just got mowed. That's why I went off camera a little bit ago, because I had to shut the windows. It's getting loud in here. But yeah, it grew pretty quick. It's clover, 5 different types of fescue, and then a couple other like flowering pollinator friendly things. But it just looks like normal grass pretty much. I mean, if you drove by, you're not gonna be like, oh, that's not a yard.
That's really cool.
If you want to take pictures at some point, not, whenever you'd like, we could use it as an example on our pollinator friendly page, here's a local resident who tried something. This is what it looked like, and here's where you can get it. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to wait till the clover hasn't flowered yet. I don't know if that's a second year thing. I don't know if it's, I know some plants are like that, but I'll try to get it when I can actually get a picture of pollinator food. Right now, it's just been green.
That'd be great. No pressure, but that would be really cool.
Just waiting for that other announcement. Anybody?
Any others?
Well, our next agenda item is number 7, which is adjournment. So maybe that's why no one's talking anymore.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Cliff.
I'll second.
Thank you, Cheryl. All in favor of adjourning?
Bye.
Bye.
Great meeting, everybody. Thank you for participating. I think we made some cool progress today, and I'm excited that the subcommittee groups are together, and hopefully we'll be able to start making meetings and making progress with those.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see everyone.
Yep.
Thank
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Yeah.